We're going to put the strobe light to auto. We're going to turn the nav and logo light to setting 1. Oh no, it doesn't, it just has a setting 2 in this version. Okay, yep, that's me misreading my own instructions there. We're going to turn the master switch for the auxiliary power unit to on, and then we're going to start the auxiliary power unit. So, the auxiliary power unit is a small jet engine in the tail of the aeroplane. So if we come and have a look, you can see heat pouring out of the back of the aeroplane. So the purpose of the auxiliary power unit is both to provide electrical power to the rest of the aeroplane during startup, and compressed air to spin up the engines. Okay, so if we go and jump in the cockpit, if we go and look down at the ECAM buttons down here, we can click APU and we get a view of the status of the speed of the APU, the exhaust gas temperature, and the power being generated by it. So it will light up in a moment that it's actually generating electricity. There it goes. So you've got voltage. Okay. So we can leave that on that screen for the moment, or now we know it's running, we can actually click APU again and it will come back. And this will change status automatically to show the state of the aeroplane as we're getting it ready. Okay, so next thing we do is go and turn the crew supply on. So I might do this from the cockpit view. Actually, it gives you a better view of where things are. And then we go and put the emergency exit lights to armed, and we put the no smoking sign to auto, and then overhead we've got the ADDS section. So this is the inertial reference system, so the aeroplane knows where it is and it measures where it is and where it's pointing by accelerations. So it feels the acceleration of the aeroplane and can therefore track where it is in space and time, basically. So it's the same way the Apollo guidance computer worked, which was the forerunner of all of these modern systems. So we turn all three of the systems to nav. I think I've got it set to instant alignment in the settings in the tablet at the moment, so we don't have to wait 10 minutes for it. But we're going to be talking so much today, it's not going to make much difference. But the alignment system of the ADDS system, it takes a few minutes because they use gyros, and it has to kind of stabilize and calibrate itself to figure out exactly where it is. And typically, if you've got the timer on, yeah, you notice that just came on. That would normally take a lot longer. The aeroplane won't know what way up it is until the ADDS system has calibrated and configured itself. Okay, next thing. We're going to go and brighten the various screens up around the aeroplane. So you can see here, this is actually your maximum brightness already, which is interesting. So we're just checking the brightnesses. So these are on max brightness as well. So are these. So the two knobs here do the brightness for the two engineering displays, so they're fine. There's also two knobs underneath the MCP or master control panel for the autopilot, so you can control here, for example, the brightness of these numbers on the displays. In the daytime it doesn't make such a difference. At night you might want to dial everything down a bit so you're not being blinded by the displays. How are we doing? So MCDU next, so the flight management control. I always forget what the different acronyms stand for. So this is the flight management computer for the Airbus. So we're going to go to the FMGC section of it. You can see at the moment it's saying GPS primary. That means the inertial navigation system is aligned and GPS configured, and it's, you know, everything's playing nicely. So the first screen you see on the MCDU is a database status screen, so it shows you what version of the AIRAC data you're using. So that's the database of airports, runways, waypoints, nav aids, all the rest of it. So what we want to do is go to the init page. So if we go to init, we could fill in all the details, and I've done this on numerous other videos. We could fill in all the details and go around all the pages of the MCDU, filling it by hand. But we've got SimBrief, so we don't have to. All we do is click on init request. Give it a few moments, and here it goes. Look, EGMC to EDDL. It's got the cost index, it's got the flight number, it's got everything. Excuse me. We can go to have a look in IRS initialization, that's all fine. So everything's basically been pre-configured. But what is good is we can come into wind temp, and we can go and do a wind request as well, and we'll fetch initialization, that's all fine. So everything's basically been pre-configured. But what is good is we can come into wind temp, and we can go and do a wind request as well, and we'll fetch the live wind data. And also, so we've got AOC, act flight plan uplink, so that just means it's done the up. So, and we'll fetch the, come into wind temp, all fine. So everything's basically been pre-configured. But what is good is we can come into wind temp, and we can go and do a wind request as well, and we'll fetch the live wind data. And also, so we've got AOC, act flight plan uplink, so that just means it's done the uplink. So we can clear that message out. Uplink insert in progress, yes, that's all done. If we go and look in the flight plan page, you can see all of the legs of our route are now in here. But remember that SimBrief didn't have the approach fully configured, so we've got that gap from EGMC to Clacton where we know we're going to be flying ourselves. And then if we scroll down through this, notice there's no speeds or altitudes at the moment. The reason for that is because there's a discontinuity here. Look, when we get to PySAP, it doesn't know what to do until we get to EDDL because there's no approach. So we go and select EDDL, and we go and select the arrival, and then we can configure. We know we're coming in ILS runway 23 left, and I think it's the piece. Approach PISA 1G, so we can go and confirm that by looking at the plan, and it was PISA 1G into ILS for runway 23 left, using the bot transition. So PISA 1G and bot, and we're good, and we can insert that, and that's put all of those missing pieces in. and we can scroll through by pushing the legs up and down the screen. Okay, so what else can we do? If we go and set our cruise altitude, actually no, before we do that, let's do things in order. We're jumping around all over the place. We're going to go into the init page and we're going to go sideways, and we're going to go and put the weights in. So we can just click on the button and it'll pull them in, because remember we did the configuration of the aircraft in the tablet. So that's got all of that now. We can also do fuel planning, so it hasn't got block fuel at the moment. If we go to fuel planning, we can just block confirm and it will get it from SimBrief, and it's got the right amount of fuel programmed into the MCDU now. Okay, so that's all filled itself out. If we go right again, we're back at the first page. There's only 2 pages. If we then go to performance, so now the airplane knows what runway it's on, it knows how heavy it is, and it knows how aggressively it can use the engines, because it's got the what's it called? The cost index already programmed in on the initialization page. So it should be able to figure out our V-speeds, and it can't. And the reason for that is because we haven't filled flaps in yet. It doesn't know what flap setting we're going to use. We're going to use 2. So then we can come in, and it now knows enough to know what the speeds will be based on the aircraft configuration to do a takeoff. Yeah? So then we can go next phase. So there's that cost index I was on about that came through from SimBrief. So the cost index is actually a formula that mandates how aggressively the aeroplane can accelerate, or how much power it can use during climb. So basically how much fuel you can burn. That's why it's the cost index. It's how much fuel are you going to throw away to make the journey happen quickly. So we can look through the phases of flight. There's various things you can configure. The final page here, look, is the approach. So you've got the QNH of the destination. So we could go and fill that in right now. So if we go and pull up Dusseldorf and open the airport here and show the weather, so you can see the QNH at the far end is 1019. So we'll put that in. See the look is the cost air it can use during climb. So basically how much fuel you can burn. That's why it's the cost index. It's how much fuel are you going to throw away to make the journey happen quickly. So we can look through the phases of flight. There's various things you can configure. The final page here, look, is the approach. So you've got the QNH of the destination. So we could go and fill that in right now. So if we go and pull up Dusseldorf and open the airport here and show the weather, so you can see the QNH at the far end is 1019. So we'll put that in. The temperature is 14 degrees centigrade. The direction, magnetic and speed of the wind is going to be 157 knots. So 150/7. And we don't have to put the baro and radio in, that should be fine. So next. So we're pretty much done with programming the basic routes into the MCDU. So what we can do is what's called a gross flight plan check. So you press the flight plan button to bring us straight to the top of the flight plan. And if you zoom out slightly so we can see both the navigation screen and this, we can switch the display. So these 2 knobs up here control the mode and range of the display. So we'll move this out to 40 miles and we'll change it to plan mode. So while you're in plan mode, the white highlighted line, which is the second line on the flight plan page, is centered on the navigation display. So then you can push the display up, which is essentially moving that highlight down, and you will see that reflected on the navigation display. So we keep pushing up and we're seeing the route as we go from waypoint to waypoint. So we can do what's called a gross check. We're just checking that it looks about right. And you can see now we've got all that data in about aircraft configuration. all of the heights and speeds are also configured in automatically. So look at that. It's quite a fiddly approach, isn't it, into Dusseldorf? But you can see those final few steps, and you can see there's Dusseldorf there. So that all looks great, actually. Okay, so we can press flight plan again to come straight back to the start, and we can switch this back to arc mode, which is an aircraft oriented view of the world. So you can see there's Clacton over there, but we're obviously going to be turning around the other way to take off, so we'll leave that alone for the moment. So what do we do next? Let's go and press Control 2, and we're looking at the master control panel. Actually, I'm going to do this from one side. It's easier from one side to explain things. So the master control panel for the autopilot on the Airbus, the knobs can be both pushed and pulled. When you push the knobs towards the aeroplane for the speed and the altitude, the heading, the altitude and the vertical speed, if you push them towards the aeroplane, you're saying you're going to make the decisions. If you pull them towards yourself, you are saying the pilot is making the decisions. So it's the difference between managed mode, which is when you push it and you get a dot, and selected mode, which is when you pull it and the aircraft, the crew have selected the parameters. So we're going to be using managed mode today. So we're going to test out what can the Airbus do for itself. So both for speed, for heading and for altitude. We still set the altitude to climb to. So we need to go and look at that SimBrief flight plan. Have we got a cruise altitude in here? 33,000 feet. So notice it says initial altitude. In the real world you might be requested to change to avoid other aircraft. So we're going to put this straight out to 33. In the real world as well, it's very unlikely you would do an initial climb straight out to cruise. They might clear you to a given altitude for a sector, and as you switch controllers over sectors you would be given higher and higher altitudes. Anyway, so we've set up the target altitude. We've said we're going to use managed mode to climb out. We're also going to press B. So notice the QNH change there. That's the barometric pressure that controls the altimeter. So the altimeter and indicated airspeed work by measuring air pressure. So pressing B in the simulator is a shortcut to tune that. Notice you can change it here. So you can pull this for standard, or you can push it to configure it. And as you change it, you'll see the altitude change over here. So if I roll it, if I press B again, then that lines up and it shows you the correct barometric pressure, so the altitude rate reading is correct for where we are. So that's just a shortcut in the simulator versus, calling the tower and saying what is the QNH. Okay, so we've configured the MCP, we've configured the MCDU. What do we do next? So let's go back overhead. We're going to go and turn the seatbelt signs to on. Now where are they? They're over here. So the reason we're doing that is we're about to start the engines and do the pushback. So we're going to turn off the external power. Remember we turned on the APU ages ago. So external power comes off and we can perform the pushback now. So the great thing about the FBWA320 is it has some wonderful pushback facilities, as we mentioned earlier. So if I turn this system on and confirm it, we can call the tug. If we look outside, we'll see the tug is coming out to the airplane. So we'll wait for the tug to get into place. And again, there's a bit of a bug in the simulator at various airports where the tug won't align until the last moment and it will suddenly jump across. So we'll wait for that tug to jump out of view. So if we sit up in the air, you'll see it suddenly skip right. It's in the wrong place at the moment. Very much depends on the airport you're at. Give it a moment. There it goes, it's jumped underneath the aeroplane. If we go and look outside now, it's lined up correctly on the landing gear. So we can, notice it says parking brake is on, so we can turn our parking brake off on our controls and we can initiate the pushback to go backwards, and you'll see a tug speed going on there. So just hang on for a second, I need to answer the door. It's always the way, isn't it? Apologies for that. So we're going to do a right turn to go out the right way, so we can see that happening. So you can see the tug is pushing us in a gentle right turn. So we want to start the engines while the pushback is happening. So this is where it's always a problem in the simulator to do everything that a real flight crew could do, because I've got one of me doing two people's jobs and talking to you at the same time. So what do we do to start the engines in the A320? Well, first of all, we need to go and turn the beacon light on, otherwise we'll get into trouble with the ACAR system. We need to go and put the fuel pumps on overhead to provide fuel to those engines. Then I'm going to do this on my controller. We're going to put the ignition switch to ignition down here. Oh, I've got them in the wrong settings. So let's do that again. This goes to ignition. That just proves I didn't do pre-flight and make sure the switches were in the right places, which is a really good lesson. So we've put ignition on, and I've turned on the ignition for the right engine, and you'll see that number start to climb. Or you will. Did I turn on the APU bleed? No, I didn't. There you go. So it just shows you, doesn't it? If you start to get out of sequence away from your checklist, you're in trouble. So the engine's coming up. The APU is providing compressed air to spin up the engine, and it's ready to go almost. So we're just coming around, spin up. There you go. Or you will. Did I turn on the APU bleed? No, I didn't. There you go. So it just shows you, doesn't it? If you start to get out of sequence away from your checklist, you're in trouble. So the engine's coming up. The APU is providing compressed air to spin up the engine, and it's ready to go almost. So we're just coming around. So we need to stop that pushback soon. So we can say stop and remove the tug. So we'll see the tug pull away from underneath us in a moment. So yeah, that was a really good illustration of if you get distracted, as answering the door then just did. I immediately went off script and caused problems. So the APU bleed needed to be on to provide the compressed air to spin the engines up. Without it, we turned on the engine starter and nothing happened. Okay, now that light has now gone out on the N2. That's the gas turbine speed on the engine. So we'll actually talk about this a bit more sensibly this time. So I'll put the parking brake back on. We're going to flick the starter switch for engine number 1. And you can see here the N2 speed is coming up. That's the gas turbine speed. Well, actually, it's the shaft in the middle of the gas turbine. It's actually measuring the speed of that. And in relation to that, you can see then the fuel starts to pump, the exhaust gas temperature comes up, it's ignited, and the N1 speed, the turbofan speed, is now increasing. So we just monitor those until it's ready. And as soon as this engine's up and running, this highlight will go out and we can continue on with turning off the APU bleed and turning off the APU. Because once the engines are running, they generate their own power for the airplane. So APU bleed can come off and the APU can come off. Okay? So we're essentially ready to taxi at this point. So before we do start taxiing, let's put the flaps to takeoff position. So we said flap setting 2. We're going to arm the nose wheel steering, which I can't remember how you do on this version of the Airbus at all, but we also need to put the predictive wind shear on. I don't think we actually do need to arm the nose wheel steering. I think it's already done for us. I may be wrong, so this is one of the things where my memory is failing me on this. We do need to arm the ground spoilers, so when you pull up on the spoiler lever, it pre-pressurizes the system that would lift the spoilers on the back of the wings. So if we needed to reject a takeoff, for example, we could do so, you know, with a bit faster reaction time from the aircraft. We're going to put the nose light to taxi before we start taxiing. So you can see nose light is up here, so that goes to taxi. And we're essentially ready to taxi now. So we'll come off the parking brake, ease the throttles forwards, centre our view up, put the head tracking on. Did we remove the... I'm just going to check. I'm not sure how clever this is. Yeah, we've got no cones or anything. It's saying the tug is still there. It is. It's got confused, hasn't it? So let's just go and go back to the pushback tug. It's saying it's still attached. It should have removed itself. I'm just going to turn the system off. The thing is, a few little bugs here and there with there always has been with pushback systems. So that's why we weren't going anywhere. We were just attempting to push the tug along the ground. So we'll wait for him to get out of the way. There he goes. So we'll gently increase the engines. There we go, we're rolling. Now you need to be careful with the A320 that you don't roll too fast. It does have a small amount of positive thrust at idle. So we're just going to slowly and deliberately make our way out to the runway. Now, remember we said about using managed mode versus selected mode on the master control panel for the autopilot. We are going to use selected mode because if you remember, we don't have a standard instrument departure. So normally you would be stopping here to get further. Instruction, and obviously we don't need to do that, we're not using ATC, so we're just going to carry on down and go to the holding point and do our final checks before we pull out onto the runway. I think this is the final holding point here. Okay. So, actually there's very little we have to do. We've done so much already in terms of flaps and everything. So we're going to line up on the runway and then put our lights on, ready to go. But while we're rolling, we could at least go and select some of these things then. We can leave the speed on managed, but we are going to change the heading to selected heading mode. We don't have any altitude restrictions on the climb out, so we can leave the altitude on managed mode, so the aircraft can get there at its own choice based on its performance. Something else you will notice on an Acura A320, or any of the big jets actually, is the nose wheel will not be, or there will be a latency between you choosing a tiller or a nose wheel direction and the nose wheel achieving it. That's because it needs time to rotate the nose wheel. Yeah, it's a powered system and it takes time for it to happen. So we wanted 230 degrees, didn't we? Let's just bring this back down to 230 while we're rolling along. Okay, so we've got selected heading mode of 230. We can go and put the automatic throttle on. Actually, I think it requires the autopilot for it to work actually, so we'll leave that as it is for the moment. We've got the flight directors are on. We're just doing a few checks around the cockpit. The QNH is correct. We could do a bit of light actually, couldn't we? It's quite dim in here. Where's the dome lighting? I can never remember where the dome lighting switch is in the Airbus. It's over on the right hand side somewhere, isn't it? There we go. It's quite a dull day today, so to help you see things, the dome lighting would be really useful. Okay, so you can see the ignition is still on, so that now it isn't, and the TCAS is on standby. So we're just running through the last few little bits and pieces. So TCAS is over here. We're going to put it to TARA. Typically you don't only go for TA. And we're going to go and do the lights, remember? So landing lights go to on now. The strobes are on auto, so we can go and put them to, to on, and that will be good. Just checking we've covered everything off. I think we have. Okay, so I'm going to turn head tracking off because we need to be quite quick at reacting to things. Right. Oh, that's saying TCAS is still on standby according to that. That's did I not actually I didn't switch it on. That was rather clever of me. I changed its mode, but I didn't switch it on. That's just rustiness on my part. Okay, so full throttle, or toga, as they call it. Let's put the head tracking back on. It's more fun, isn't it? So there's the rotate speed. Gear up. Auto throttle came on automatically, and we can turn the autopilot on. But we need to pull the throttles back to the climb descent, which means then the auto throttle can actually override what we're doing. So at this point we're climbing out, but we want to do an immediate right turn really. So we'll go and raise the flaps, let the aircraft accelerate. We'll let it climb out a little way. And then we're going to spin the aeroplane round. So I'm going to turn the head tracking off so we don't get any accidents happen at this point. So let's start the aeroplane turning. So what we could do is tell it to go direct to Clacton. Yeah, so direct to Clacton at this point, and insert that into the flight plan, and it's going to do it all for us. So now we can just go, it's on managed mode, look, already. Because we used direct on the MCDU, it switched the heading mode to managed mode. We can also go managed mode up to 33,000 feet. We don't have to have the ground spoilers armed anymore. Seat belts are still on, landing lights are still on. The speed is being held. We've gone through 6,000 feet, which was the transition altitude already. So notice QNH is flashing. So we need to pull this to go to standard QNH. Notice we're holding at 250 knots, that's because we're below 10,000 feet. It will suddenly accelerate when we get past 10,000 feet. Now. See, and the target airspeed has jumped. So now we're heading out towards Clacton. Notice though, we've allowed it to go faster than that initial speed, so it's got the curve slightly wrong. But there's not a big problem, it will correct all on its own. So the roll will come back out in a moment. Or we hope it will. Let's watch it do it. There it goes. So it's just correcting its path. Look, the flight director is telling it to roll left gently. So that green crosshair is the flight director. That's it saying this is what control I want you to be doing. And the autopilot blindly follows what the flight director tells it, basically. Okay, so we have a look outside. So we come up through 10,000 feet. We've done a problem there straight away. We should have turned the landing lights off at 10,000 feet as well. But this is the problem of talking and doing it. same time. So a load of the lights can come off. So we're now basically configured for climb out and cruise. So we're on our way to Dusseldorf. So I think I did say at the start, I will make small mistakes here and there because it is so difficult to talk and do and explain and fit everything in without it just becoming a big jumbled mess. So we'll have if we go and look at ACARS, you'll see it complain about that light. Rule violation, landing light must be off above 10,000. Yeah, we set it off. Otherwise we did quite well. No other violations. So the Airbus works really nicely with ACARS because all of the parameters are nicely configured for it. So just to remind you, ACARS is the system the airline uses to track where your aeroplane is and how you're doing. Okay, so we're not going to have really much to do until we get to top of descent a bit later on now. So I may pause recording so you don't end up watching nothing happening for the next however long. So you can see us departing on little nav map here and going off across the channel. You can see the same thing happening on Navigraph. Slightly different presentation. Navigraph focuses on showing you the jet airways and stuff. You can do the same thing in little nav map. So you've got the low altitude airways, you've also got the high altitude airways. They're not quite as pretty as the view of them in Navigraph. So you can see we did that right turn and now we're coming out towards Clacton. The reason you won't immediately jump on an airway is airways are at altitude. So we're coming up underneath the airways to meet them. So we're doing the right turn at Clacton, off towards the rest of the route. So I will pause recording at this point and unpause when we're a bit further on down the trek. See you in a bit. Okay, I'm back with you. I thought it might be worth having a look at some of the systems on the aeroplane before we actually get near descent. So we can see top of descent is marked in just past the waypoint PAM. If we zoom out slightly on the navigation display, you can see there's the rest of the route in. So I thought it might be worth having a little look at how you can do holds in the A320 when it's implemented properly. So we're looking at the flight plan page here, which shows you from the previous waypoint onto the next waypoint, typically at the top of the screen, but you can scroll the screen up and down to look around it. If you get lost, you just press flight plan and it takes you to the top again. So you can see in a couple of waypoints time we will arrive at PAM. So if we select PAM on the display, we can say we want to do a hold at PAM. And you can see it's illustrating how that hold might happen. We can do it turning left or right. So if we did left, for example, so I've keyed, let's just press Control 5. I keyed L, put that over the top of the R there, revert to computable, put it back as it wanted to do it. But you can see now it's indicating, okay, so we put a left in. Okay, so we can insert this into the flight plan. So we now can see the flight plan has changed. So if we go flight plan, we've got PAM, hold left, PAM. Yep, so it's going to do a hold when we get there. If we don't want that in the flight plan, we can just clear it. So hit clear, remove the hold, and then remove the discontinuity that's appeared as well. And we're back to where we were. So if you want to put hold in, that's the easy way to do it. So if you're, busy, this is the home simulator world, I guess. If you know you've got to leave for a while, but you don't actually want to pause your flight, you could actually put the aeroplane in hold, or if you're not sure you're going to be back in time to do descent, you could program a hold into your flight plan. Obviously in the real world it's done for entirely different reasons. Okay, so we are approaching in about 30 miles time top of descent. So we are going to select our altitude we want to descend down to. We won't do it just yet, we'll wait till we're closer to top of descent. So the real thing to think about here is the aeroplane is figuring out, well, top of descent to where? We'll have to set a target altitude and say managed mode, and then it will start descending, and it will follow any altitude restrictions. I don't think there are many. If we go and have a look at the chart, what this basically means is stay above 6,000 feet on the way around here. It would say 6,000 in blue. These are the airway restrictions. Yeah, at or below 6,000 for this hold. It's interesting, isn't it? There's a hold here, look. So when you get to here, you could get held, and you could get held here coming in from a different direction to eventually come out this way. It's interesting how the various different routes happen. If we go and have a look at the ILS, which is the more detailed view of once you get down, so we'll be leaving this waypoint and coming in. So the ILS is 110.95, okay, for this route in, or 110.9 I should say, 232 degrees. So in the Airbus you don't have to actually program any of this by hand. If you go and look at the radio navigation page, you can see it's already programmed in. Because the aeroplane knows where we're going and it has a database of all of the runways and the frequencies and everything, it's already configured the ILS. So when we get within range of the runway on descent, we will switch over from arc mode to landing system mode. Okay, and it will just change this display to suit. So the Airbus, unlike more simple aircraft, can use both GPS and radio navigation simultaneously. There's the nose wheel steering switch that I was talking about earlier. I couldn't remember where it was. It's on by default. That's why we didn't have any problems with steering the aeroplane. I need to leave a note on the written instructions of where things are in some cases that are not the typical things you look for. A bit like the predictive wind shear switch down here. So notice this is also quite dim on the backup attitude indicator, so we could brighten that up. I missed that when I was going around the cockpit. Okay, we're getting near to top of descent, so we want to come down to 3,000 feet essentially. So we'll say 3,000 and we'll start it a little early and we'll say managed mode. Watch the aeroplane descend. So the speed is in managed mode, the heading is managed mode, the altitude is managed mode. So it's going to descend as it can following any restrictions that exist. and it will vary the descent rate as it goes.
Welcome to flight deck, ladies and gentlemen. As you may have noticed, we have begun our initial descent down to our destination. Now would be a good time to wrap up any business you need to take care of as we prepare for our approach. If you are up, once you return to your seat, we ask that you remain seated until the aircraft arrives safely at the gate. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin for arrival.
Going to turn the seatbelt sign back on. So while we were paused, I turned the seatbelt sign off because obviously we got to top of cruise, or to our cruise altitude, I should say. So we're on our way in. So the factors we have to think about now on arrival are we're looking for transition altitude is 5,000 feet. That's when we will need to change the barometric pressure reading on the altimeters to make them accurate to the destination. Also, when we come through 10,000 feet, we will need to go and turn the landing lights on. So it's a waiting game at the moment, just watching the map, watching the descent happen for the next few minutes. It's an amazing simulator, isn't it? The weather modelling is just out of this world. 30,000 feet and continuing on down. While we are descending, should we go and have a little nosy around the aeroplane? Can we get through? Oh, it doesn't look like we can. I don't think they've modelled the cabin in the fly-by-wire, which saves frame rate enormously, so it makes it nice and smooth. All of the various systems overhead all work, so you can play around with testing the fire alarms and all that kind of stuff. You can also turn off the flight control systems, so you can remove all the safeguards. It's great fun, it really is. And yeah, the fidelity built into this system is just next level. So if we go flight plan, I think I've shown this before. If you go to MCDU menu, ATSU, AOC, and we'll do a weather request. So by default it's got the departure, destination and the backup airfield, the secondary landing airfield. We're going to do a METAR request, so we'll send that request. We'll come back out of here and you can see there's a received messages here, but we should get a notification over here as well. So it will say message received. So we'll just wait for that to appear. Hopefully it will turn up. At some point today. Has it done it without us even knowing? No, there's no messages yet. There we go, company message. So messages received, there's a METAR message, and there's the weather at the various stations we are. asked for. And the real lovely trick in the... There we go, company message. A number and the backup. Or if you go to and yeah, the fidelity built into this system is just next level. So if we go flight plan, I think I've shown this before. If you go to MCDU menu, sorry, ATSU, AOC, and we'll do a weather request. So by default, it's got the departure, destination, and the backup airfield. You know, the secondary landing airfield. We're going to do a METAR request, so we'll send that request. We'll come back out of here, and you can see there's a received messages here, but we should get a notification over here as well. So it will say message received. So we'll just wait for that to appear. Hopefully it will turn up. At some point today. Has it done it without us even knowing? No, there's no messages yet. There we go, company message. So messages received, there's a METAR message, and there's the weather at the various stations we asked for. And the real lovely trick in the fly-by-wire A320 is we can print that out. So we can press the print button, and if we look around, there's a little thermal printer in the corner of the pedestal. And out comes our weather printout. So if you hang on for a moment and just click on the bit of paper and look over here, it's a bit burnt out by the camera settings. So if we go there, you can see that written on there. So EDDL, we've got a QNH of 1019. So if we go and look, remember in the MCDU, we could set the phases, so we can go next phase. It knows we're in descent phase at the moment. So we've got 1019 already programmed down. Yeah, we did this earlier, so it's all fine. Good. So obviously you've got comm radios here, that all works. Obviously we've not got ATC, so we don't need to use them. We've got the various statuses of the screen of the systems on the aeroplane. It all works. So we can see the engines, the bleed systems, the pressurization, the electric systems, the hydraulic systems, the fuel systems, the APU, as we saw earlier, air conditioning, the doors, the wheels. The flight control systems, and it can cycle through all of them for you. So, but we can just clear that. If you clear it, it shows you the default screen you should be showing based on the phase of flight. Okay, we're getting closer, so let's go and drop the range down from 80 to 40 miles now, so we can see some more detail here. Go down to 20,000 feet. This area of Germany is very flat, so there's no real restrictions in terms of landscape to obey. It tends to be quite straightforward. The reason it's a wiggly route, I think, is because there are a number of big airports nearby. You can see this on little nav map more accurately. So you've got Dortmund, you've got Düsseldorf, you've got Cologne. Just over to the northeast of us we've got Munster and Paderborn. There's a number of them. Obviously you've got Frankfurt, which is a huge busy airport, but that's quite a way away, 100 miles away. But you've got another one here, Mönchengladbach. So all of those airways into the airports, or standard terminal arrival routes, will all be crisscrossing around each other, which is why this probably threads this pattern to avoid corridors into the others. And it may be noise abatement as well once we get lower, to avoid annoying people on the ground. So 15,000 feet, not far to go. About 40 miles left, something like that. If we pull up the progress screen, gives you some basic stats. Not anything really of huge import to us. Flight plan page is usually the more interesting page to look at. Notice you can go sideways. Well, actually, I thought you should be able to. That's interesting, because it's showing an indication that you should be able to. So it's saying at the moment throttle is on idle. We're getting... It's trying to decelerate because it's going to aim for 250 knots when we're at 10,000 feet. So it'll be interesting to see how accurately it does that. So it should lift the nose. It's on managed speed, managed descent. So it will know about aviation law. So that might be what this marker is for, at the point at which we're coming down through 10,000. There's little bits and pieces that I can never remember with the A320 about the symbology. So just for our own interests on approach, let's pull up the ILS chart. Was a good one to have, wasn't it? Because we're almost on it already, look. So remember, at 10,000 feet we have to get the landing lights ready, but you should see the aeroplane level out at 10,000 to manage the speed, to decelerate to 10,000. Sorry, to 250 knots. Seatbelts are on. Just approaching 10,000 feet. There we go, look, it's cut back to 250 knots now as we approach. 10,000, the nose is coming up, the descent rate is vanishing, and you can see the deceleration is happening. So we're within 100 feet of 10,000, so we'll go and turn the landing lights on. We'll put the nose.
Okay, that's it.
Nose light on already, even though we don't need it yet. Just coming through 10,000 feet now. So remember, we changed to the destination barometric pressure at 5,000 feet. And the destination barometric pressure, we can find this out in lots of ways actually. It's 5,000. It won't, could, it, coming down to is on, and have a look just off. Very standard and get the apple. It's a feet here.
2,500.
And we'll say 2,600 feet. You see the runways out there. So if we go to landing system, you can see we haven't quite picked up the ILS yet.
2,500.
There's the localizer is off to the left of us. It's just coming in as we line up. We're on the left runway, aren't we? I seem to remember. Was it 27 left? And here comes the glide slope. So we'll go to approach mode now. And we'll turn on both autopilots at once. Yeah, we're just lining up, look on the left runway. Speed is coming off, so gear can come down. And first stage of flaps. Second stage of flaps.
2,500.
And you can see the glide slope is just approaching us, so that you imagine there's an invisible line through the sky, and we're approaching it from underneath. You have to approach it from underneath for approach mode to capture. And you should see then, as soon as we cross through it, the aeroplane will start descending. And it'll be a 3-degree line down to the runway. Here we go, look, the descent is just starting. Usually works out about 700 feet a minute.
2,500.
The speed has come right off, so we can go more flaps.
2,500.
So we've gone for full flaps. So you can see the indication there is the flaps have extended. We're on autopilot, cruising into Dusseldorf. We can put the auto braking on, or can we? Will it let us? There we go. So you can see here indicated on the guidance, it's using glide slope, it's using the localizer. It's on Cat 3 dual, which means it can use both systems at once. If we have a look outside, we can see our aeroplane nicely configured and on its way in. No drama whatsoever. Unless, of course, I start trying to control it on the way in. Today I'm going to let it land itself. It always makes me a bit itchy letting it land itself. I'd rather be in control. Typically I get to, sort of 5 miles out and I take over. But today we're letting it do its thing. Just while we're on approach here, let's pull up the airport chart. So we're going to come in, we're going to turn left then, we're going to roll quite long and turn left for the terminals. That makes sense. Okay, so let's go and put the head tracking on. So yeah, just a reminder, today we've been looking at the fly-by-wire A320 and we're watching it do its thing with doing what Airbuses do so well, which is fly themselves. It takes a lot of configuration work to make it happen. We slipstreamed that a lot by using SimBrief. So what is being read out here is the radar altitude above the ground, which is different than the barometric. So this is above sea level. What's being read out is the actual distance above the ground below us, which is descending obviously, and it's deviating as buildings or hills or trees roll past beneath us, but it is coming down, look. So should we watch this from outside? Let's see it happen. I never think to do this. So it's a little bit low according to this. Or maybe that's my viewpoint. Yeah, it is. My viewpoint is obviously seeing the PAPI lights from a different vantage point than the cockpit. Now I'm going to get ready to jump inside the cockpit as soon as we touch the ground, because I'll need to control the aeroplane. It should start flaring, and there it goes. Oh, look at it, crabbing. So we'll go full reverse. We can use reversers until 80 knots. Then off the reversers and onto the brakes, and flaps can come up, and we'll just roll along now. We're going to turn off the autopilot. It's trying to help steer on the runway, which isn't always the most helpful thing in the world. So as we said, we're going to roll along until the next exit. So we're doing just below 40 knots. So we'll just start feathering the brakes in a moment, ready to come off the runway. Open the engines up gently. So on the roll in, we can switch on the APU and start it. Whoa, it started to race away with us. It's fine. So the landing lights can come back off. Oh, it's always a pain with the head tracking, look. It took me 3 goes then to grab the lights. And now it's gone and put us on a wide angle view because it zoomed out instead of moving the light switches. The nose light needs to go to taxi. So where are we going to taxi into? One of these gates over here, yeah? Looks good, doesn't it? So let's just follow the lines and try to avoid these vans at the same time. Obviously this is not a study level airport here at Düsseldorf, so we're getting the stock flight sim assets, but it's not bad, is it? It's pretty good. So if we stop the aeroplane there, and we should find, remember we've got the APU running, so it's already generating electricity. So cross-feed over to the APU will happen automatically in the Airbus. So all we need to do is shut the engines down, and it should go and switch over power automatically. So the engines are dying, and you'll hear those clunks you heard would have been the relays transferring power over to the APU. So then we can go back over to, I'm going to turn the head tracking off because it's being a pain. We can go back over to the services on the ground. We can ask for the chocks and everything to be put in place. So ground power unit, please. And we could do the jet bridge, please. Did we get this one? Yeah, here it comes. So we'll let the jet bridge roll out. Can we connect itself to the aeroplane? Wonder how accurately it will happen. Not accurately at all, as it happens. It really is luck of the draw, isn't it, with some airports, whether it's going to do it accurately or not. So the passengers have a bit of a jump to make there. So we can open that forward door. Oh dear. It's quite amusing when that sort of thing happens, isn't it? So you can trigger lots of other things to happen around the aeroplane. It's all good. Okay, so then obviously we can run around the aeroplane shutting things down. So did we connect the ground power? I don't think I did I? Oh yeah, I did, yeah. So Control 8 goes back overhead. So we can start doing things like turning the fuel pumps back off. And we could turn ADDLs off. We could turn all these lights off. Turn the dome lights off. To get rid of the... Did I do the passenger seats yet? No. Let them get up. Start causing mayhem behind us. And we're pretty much there. There's not a lot to switch off in the Airbus. Most of it is configuration work for flight. I'm going to turn off TCAS. Turn the predictive wind shear back off. That nose wheel steering should really been off beforehand earlier, but that's all good. So there we go. Job's a good one. I'm going to leave it there. So, all the not teach yet. So like around the so we're getting the stock flight sim assets, but it's not bad, is it? It's pretty good. So if we stop the aeroplane there, and we should find, remember we've got the APU running, so it's already generating electricity. So cross-feed over to the APU will happen automatically in the Airbus. So all we need to do is shut the engines down, and it should go and switch over power automatically. So the engines are dying, And you'll hear those clunks you heard would have been the relays transferring power over to the APU. So then we can go back over to, I'm going to turn the head tracking off because it's being a pain. We can go back over to the services on the ground. We can ask for the chocks and everything to be put in place. So ground power unit, please. And we could do the jet bridge, please. Did we get this one? Yeah, here it comes. So we'll let the jet bridge roll out. Can we connect itself to the aeroplane? Wonder how accurately it will happen. Not accurately at all, as it happens. It really is luck of the draw, isn't it, with some airports, whether it's going to do it accurately or not. So the passengers have a bit of a jump to make there. So we can open that forward door. Oh dear. It's quite amusing when that sort of thing happens, isn't it? So you can trigger lots of other things to happen around the aeroplane. It's all good. Okay, so then obviously we can run around the aeroplane shutting things down. So did we connect the ground power? I don't think I did I? Oh yeah, I did, yeah. So Control 8 goes back overhead. So we can start doing things like turning the fuel pumps back off. And we could turn ADDLs off. We could turn all these lights off. Turn the dome lights off. To get rid of the... Did I do the passenger seats yet? No. Let them get up. Start causing mayhem behind us. And we're pretty much there. There's not a lot to switch off in the Airbus. Most of it is configuration work for flight. Go and turn off TCAS. Turn the predictive wind shear back off. That nose wheel steering should really been off beforehand earlier, but that's all good. So there we go. Job's a good one. I'm going to leave it there. So, the last thing we need to do is on my flight, because there we go, we've got the flight into Dusseldorf tracked by ACARS. I need to go into the flight page on here, and I end the flight. This is nothing to do with the A320. This is just my bit of paperwork and record keeping. Example flight, example flight into Dusseldorf with the fly-by-wire A320 file flight. And that's done.